folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Guess who's back again?
Yes, you're listening to Not So Giant Women, the Steven Universe podcast on which Ivy and Daria are today going to discuss maximum capacity.
The title just makes me think of lifts or elevators for the United Statesians. Whenever you go into a lift, there's a sign saying maximum capacity, however many people.
Yeah. I think a lot of the ones I've seen have a maximum weight limit or something.
I see one or the other.
Yeah, definitely something in this episode is implying that it is approaching its limits.
Something is too full.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's find out.
We are the crystal gems. We'll always save the day.
Oh, thank you, Amethyst.
Whoa. And that was the one with the big mood shift in the middle.
Yes. Oh my goodness, this episode.
Oh, yeah. Let's see if I remember how to recap things.
Good luck.
Open on Greg and Stephen. Well, it's still winter. It's the day before New Year's Eve. Greg is taking away a cardboard cutout stand-up of himself, offering a summer wax deal, which he realizes is probably not the best time of year for. He's going to put it in his storage unit. When he gets there, he discovers it's quite full. Not only is there no room for the stand-up, but there's no room for what's already in there. It just bursts forth all over them. Stephen says he knows just the gem to take care of this, and Amethyst comes along. Greg says what we're all thinking of that. Oh, I thought you were going to bring Pearl. But as Stephen rightly points out, Amethyst is used to dealing with large piles of junk, and in fact even adds, come on, Greg, I've seen your junk before.
Oh, my. Oh, Amethyst.
And make sure this episode is definitely getting TV PG and not G or Y7. As they start to root through the belongings, and Amethyst thinks pretty much everything is keep-worthy, though Greg spirits away some of his pulp sci-fi soft porn. And Stephen mentions in passing that books are cool again because he's been banned from TV for 1,000 years, which Greg doesn't even remember. I do like that this kind of pops up as still being a thing, and even though everyone else actually has forgotten it. But speaking of the TV, at the back, Amethyst finds a bunch of videotapes of what appears to be the complete run of a show called Lil Butler, which is a sitcom about a rich family who find an abandoned baby on their doorstep who is also a butler. Having lived through chunks of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, this just feels completely plausible as a sitcom idea, and I'm surprised it's not still running. It'd probably be getting a reboot about now. And as Amethyst and Greg gush over this a bit and decide to just put on an episode for old time's sake, they end up getting quite distracted by just watching more and more episodes of Little Butler when Stephen arrives the next morning thinking he's going to spend the day helping his dad sorting out the storage locker. Greg and Amethyst still waist deep in old episodes of Little Butler, just putting on just one more over and over again. Stephen tries to break through to them, but they're not really paying attention. Amethyst just takes the breakfast Stephen bought for him and Greg as, oh, cool, snacks. And Stephen says, well, I'll see you at the fireworks tonight. It's been made clear that Greg and Stephen watching New Year fireworks together is a bit of a special thing for them. Something I sort of brushed over was that there is a touching conversation at the start where Stephen asks Greg what his favourite firework is, which is, I think, a conversation I had with my own dad many, many years ago. So that was kind of cute to see. The other two get back into their sitcoms. Stephen has at the fireworks for the other two gems, trying to explain the best parts of making noise with pots and pans as the fireworks go off. And he's sure that Greg and Amethyst will be here any minute, except then we hear them counting down in the background and the fireworks go off. Pearl tries to make some noise and join in, and Garnet says that her volume is not sufficient and smacks two pans together very loudly. So that's so good. They also mention when hearing that Greg and Amethyst aren't there, oh, they're not watching that stupid show again, are they? And Stephen's like, what, Little Butler? And it's like, oh, they were watching it just all the time, just after your mum died, gave up her physical form, disappeared, whatever we're calling it at the moment, until one day just kind of stopped. At the moment, however, they haven't just kind of stopped yet. They're still watching right through the fireworks. Greg is snapped out of the little butler trance just long enough to feel bad that he's missed the fireworks because he wanted to be there with Stephen, having promised him he would. And Amethyst says, oh, it would just be like this, and shapeshifts into Stephen and does a brief, oh, cool, fireworks impression. This makes Greg uncomfortable. You already know he's a bit uncomfortable with shapeshifting, probably doubly so when Amethyst is shapeshifting into his son and, whether consciously or not, trolling him for missing a commitment with him.
Yeah.
She then shapeshifts into Greg in a eerie hair-twirling manner, which she's trying to tell him not to be uptight, but this is stressing him out even more. And this is, you really have to see to feel the tone shift here, as it's gone from little snippets of the sitcoms about these far too rich people and catchphrases and things, so you can palpably feel the discomfort in the room when Amethyst starts shape-shifting this way, because she's not just shape-shifting into like pigs or helicopters or something. These are things deeply personal to Greg, and for strike 3 she seems as deeply personal as she can get by shape-shifting into Rose, and Greg won't even look at her. And in fact, the camera won't either until Stephen bursts in to find out what has been going on, and he sees Amethyst shape-shifting into his mother, and he is not impressed either. And even Amethyst Rose looks caught out for a moment before she returns to her regular form. And Stephen basically gives them a mini lecture about the past being hard to deal with, and Amethyst is, oh, that's right, I missed Amethyst saying that she used to have someone who would do all sorts of things with her before Greg took her away from her. That's what really piqued the discomfort before Stephen burst in. I apologize, got that a bit out of order. So Stephen has not quite got the worst of this, but he can tell things are going wrong and tells them off and says sometimes it's hard to deal with the past, but sometimes you just have to, and also makes it clear that the amount of junk is not just a metaphor for the past, because he does have too much junk. Like, why does he have a cat carrier? He doesn't even have a cat.
Yeah.
The next day, after this heated moment, we return to the storage locker to find it far more organized and clean, because Pearl really has got involved and sorted it out all nice. Amethyst has offered to do something a lot of us probably thought from the start, of pointing out that she has access to an entire pocket dimension as a room, so she can just keep anything she thinks shouldn't be thrown in there. And we get to see Garnet doing some cleaning as she's holding a clean stack of boxes higher than herself just on one hand, which Garnet again did little but earned her money this week. And as a kind of conciliatory gesture, if not flat out apology, Amethyst has replaced the frame that they broke earlier on the photograph of Greg and Rose together and gives it to him. And we, rather than iris out, we go out on closing the door of the storage locker and going to black. Sorry, a bit out of order there, but that is what happened this week. And as I said, you very much get thrown from this funny tour of Greg's old crap to some really reaches out of the screen and makes you uncomfortable stuff with the shape-shifting, that even when you just see the edge of Amethyst turning into Rose, even before she does it, I can't speak for every viewer, but I was kind of no, she's not going to turn into Rosie. She could, that would just be too far. And
There's
of course it did.
She's doing,
and it was.
Yeah. I was really wondering kind of what you would think of that. I mean, especially since historically so far, the Amethyst-focused episodes seem to be the ones that are hitting you the hardest. So this one was a whammy for most people, even if they don't have a connection with Amethyst. So, you know.
Yeah, and I admit it was actually, even though I usually feel for Amethyst, this time it was kind of hard to entirely find for her, as she could tell, we could tell, and I doubt she couldn't tell how badly that moment was going and how worse she was making it. And you kind of get the impression from it in the surrounding scenes, this isn't the first time this has happened either. So even if she couldn't predict it, she should at least remember what happened last time. And Greg says, I know you like making me uncomfortable, but normally she likes comically discomforting him. And we've seen that before. And normally he just grumbles a bit and blows it off. But this is hitting him hard. He's hurt. He's not annoyed. He is not even really angry. He's just hurt. Right.
And she's not responding as if this is a person that she cares about his feelings. She's just continuing to troll him and mess with him.
He even says, I want to be friends again. And she just presses on. And whether she wants to be friends or if she just can't let go of what she's doing. I'd say by the end of the episode, she kind of understands she wants to be friends again, but that's a kind of moment that even in Steven universe is going to take some getting around.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely get the idea that Greg is used to her crap, but sometimes when she crosses the line, he just has to say, that's enough. I can't take this off of you.
And really illustrates something we've seen about Greg in that he most of the time is funny, jovial, does strange things with his car wash. Sometimes thinks about his rock music, Greg, but he knows when he has to step up and be more of an adult. And this was definitely one of those times that shows that is a part of him. It's like, yeah, we were having fun watching the sitcom and maybe we could watch Hawaii Special, but, you've taken it too far. You've wrecked it. Yeah.
I think they picked a good time for this episode to air because at least up to this point, we've seen some evidence that Amethyst has self-worth issues. And if you showed her doing something like this much earlier, you would get an idea she's a cruel person. Like she really just did something basically traumatizing, something intentionally triggering for Greg. And it was hard to watch. Like you were saying, it's like, she's not going to, there's no way that's unforgivable, but it's not really unforgivable, but it's definitely over the line, way, way over the line.
Yeah, this isn't like she turned into a Scottish Terrier and peed on his van or something.
Right. Or even when she was trolling him by turning into a weird purple version of him. She's just messing with him or whatever. But you turn into somebody's dead partner while you're yelling at him about that you want him to stay here and watch TV instead of being with his son. It's a very complicated set of feelings that she must be dealing with. And it's hard to interpret why she would do that without saying she's a jerk. She's a mean person. And I don't think that about her. And this episode confused me the first time I saw it. I'm like, why is she acting like this? Where is this coming from?
I mean, in some ways, there is a bit of some children, especially toddlers, will press further, maybe not understanding they're hurting someone, but not understanding why they're not supposed to hurt someone. Mm-hmm. So I don't think she's oblivious enough to think she wasn't hurting him. Mm-hmm. But I also don't think she did it with full awareness of the effect it would have either, which is a complicated line to be standing on.
Yes, I think so.
And I think in this case, real life analogs are hard because most of us can't shapeshift, of course. Right. But there is an extra layer in what they say in that one of the things that leads them down this rabbit hole, or at least the first time of leading them down this rabbit hole of just watching the show all the time, was the absence of the death, passing, transition, forming, whatever of Rose. And that Rose is kind of a point of contention in that she saw Greg as having taken her away from her. So maybe when she first passed, there was a bit of a, this is our mutual loss thing, so we rebond. But then when you scratch a bit further, there was a layer of, well, not a layer, a core of, she wouldn't have passed if it weren't for you.
Definitely got to be some resentment there.
Which is technically true because, she died because she created Stephen, and that was something she was doing with Greg. No Greg, no Stephen, no giving up your physical form. And this isn't the same as saying it's Greg's fault, Greg killed her or anything. But if you're as emotionally volatile as Amethyst can be, then once you focus on that, you're going to see Greg as basic part of, if not the reason, Rose is no longer here.
Yeah. I'm looking at it from a Gem's point of view. I mean, they must have known each other so long, and then all of a sudden, she's just gone. Somebody that you had for all those years. We don't really get to see, we don't know anything about what that moment was like or how long they knew it was coming. And we don't have all the history of Rose and Amethyst, what their relationship was like, but it was clearly very special.
Well, you mentioned how long they would have known each other, even from the clues we've got so far. Before that point, Amethyst essentially wouldn't have known the idea of knowing people, and Rose not being one of them.
Yeah, I think you're right, because in the kindergarten episode in On the Run, she was talking about rocks as her friends, and she said, I lived here for a while, I guess, at least until I was found by your mom and the others.
Yeah, and however long ago that was, we know it was at least sometime because we saw the painting of them in their Hamilton outfits with the sharks. So
Yep. Yep. They were old-timey people, and they were together.
So
Indeed.
that's a long time. Her entire world of other beings for a good few centuries would have been those three, and it would have suddenly cut down to those two.
Yeah. And then just based on kind of what she yelled at him in her moment of passion there, I had someone who was always there for me until she started hanging out with you. And I mean, I can go into detail in a minute about how consistently that gets misunderstood. But, you know, in the fandom, there's a lot of confusion about this episode because some people think she was expressing that she wanted to have a special relationship with Greg, which I didn't see that at all. But because of the wording and because of, I guess, heteronormative ideas, people are seeing, oh, she's hanging out with him. She's saying she's seen his junk, you know, like she's making these off-color jokes about it that, you know, I'm sure that you would agree with me because of a lot of the levels of understanding of this sort of thing that we share, is that it's so infuriating that people think relationships like that could only be explained by having a romantic relationship or having, you know, a particular kind of relationship that is so well understood as like a serious one.
Oh,
but
exactly.
to me, it was like, yeah, I mean, to me, it was like watching Amethyst and Greg. They are so similar. Just they both like to hoard stuff, eat junk, watch crappy TV. I mean, they even have the same hair. Like this long floppy hair, and they're both sitting there watching this TV show with their ripped pants, and I'm like, they really are bros, aren't they? Like that's what I got from their relationship, that they bonded like that because they were into the same stuff and they both lost someone.
And that on its own could be fine. That could work out great for everyone, except while it's in this case the doing nothing but watching the show was kind of a destructive behavior, even if it was directly literally destructive of them. The other gems, even without going deeper on it, do sort of remark, oh, they're watching that show again. Yeah. Without going into, well, last time she shapeshifted into Rose and all this happened, but they obviously think it's not healthy for them to be just watching Lil Butler and doing nothing else 24/7, which, well, you know, even in human terms, it's really not. I mean, watch a sitcom, hang with your bros, eat stuff, do it for a long time, fine. But if you're doing nothing else.
Right. And you're falling asleep in front of things and forgetting your responsibilities, forgetting to take care of your kid.
Yeah, exactly that. And I'm sure some could see an addiction metaphor in there, but I saw it more as sort of the self-destructive behavior more broadly.
I think so. I also think it was really complicated, kind of what must have been boiling underneath, causing Amethyst to do something that hurtful, just to get some kind of reaction. I mean, I've obviously been thinking about this episode a lot longer than you've had the opportunity to, because you just saw it. But after thinking about it for a while, one of my kind of theories for why she acts like that is, you know, that she expresses in her outburst that she felt that Rose was there for her until all of a sudden there's this guy in her life and he's the special one. He's the one that she's defaulting to spending time with and paying attention to. And she feels a loss there. She probably didn't feel entirely like she'd been abandoned or anything because she still got to see Rose. But then, you know, if she's gone so suddenly, it's just like there was this period of she's always choosing him. She chooses him. She chooses him. I want to be chosen. And even though it's petty, I want to be chosen over someone. I want to be picked instead of somebody else. And that's, I mean, I don't think of her as overall a cruel person, but it really did puzzle me to see her just pushing her to ignore and neglect Stephen for her, because the only thing that made sense to me for that behavior to be satisfying for her is just this idea that she would want to be somebody's first pick for once. And it's not even about Greg necessarily. It's just, it would feel good to be somebody's priority. And that was my theory about it.
And I think this goes back to our many, many conversations on gem aging / maturity. I think also the other two, even only the Stephen's age years old ago, would have more adaptability to be able to change as things change, to adapt. So as Greg takes over more of Rose's time, or when Rose dies, not that they wouldn't care that their friend, sister, however you put it, died, but they can adapt and move on because Pearl and Garnet's personalities are better suited for that. Not that they don't feel the loss, but they can make it a part of them and move forward. Amethyst being far more a ball of emotion, possibly doesn't process or didn't process as much as they do, or as much as could have been good for her. I mean, as you say, there's obviously something still not 100% resolved for her if she's just shape-shifting into Rose and basically saying, hey, Greg, pay attention to me.
Yeah, she said, I bet you'd stay for her. Like, if I was Rose, if I was your somebody, would you stay? You know? And it's not even like, oh, I want to replace her or whatever. It's just nobody ever treats her like she's the number one. And
everyone gets to be special for someone except me.
Right. I've never really interpreted her as being interested in anyone that way. She doesn't seem to act like she has a crush on anyone ever. But, I've definitely seen that she wants certain kinds of attention. She wants to be respected and paid attention to and not get yelled at and not get shamed, a lot
not get overlooked.
Child. Yes, not get overlooked, not get left out, not get taught that she's other. And of course, now that we've recently seen an episode where she tells that her origin is different from the other two, that they're from space and she's not. Like, there's got to be this huge feeling like I'm the outsider in this group. I'm not from space.
Well, even when you think about her origin in the kindergarten caves, it's kind of a case of being overlooked because all the other gems born there, if they were, I don't know, other Amethystians, whatever, but whoever they were, they obviously left to go do whatever newly hatched gems do. And she was just kind of left there to crawl out of her hatching hole and make friends with some rocks. And plainly, the other kindergarten gems didn't go, oh, wasn't there supposed to be a purple one with us? We should go back and just check on that. So her origin story is being abandoned and overlooked, even if it's not explicit. I'd say that's a good part of her makeup too, not just I was hatched from a bad place, but I was hatched from a bad place, and even the other bad people didn't care about me.
Yeah, she definitely doesn't seem to mention ever being aware of them or knowing who they were or having any understanding of who might have occupied those other holes, which are clearly implied to have been other versions of her, like so many holes. Had to be somebody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was going to say it's made clear. It's not made clear, but you can pick up enough from that and surrounding mentions that this was a place where a bunch of gems should have been hatched, and we only met one who was all by herself.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the term they use, but I'm kind of liking hatch for gems.
Yeah. They really haven't gone into any detail about the specifics of the time that she spent there, if she interpreted it as being abandoned or if she even knew really what loneliness was. But it seems like, she would have had some feelings about it. She probably would have, especially after she learned what a kindergarten was and what the people who found her thought of kindergartens.
Well,
especially, she must have had very complicated feelings about it.
Depending how long she spent on her own in the kindergarten, she might not even have known there were such things as other people.
Right. That weren't non-speaking rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You both thought, I'm a freak. I can move and walk and talk.
Yeah. I wonder if she ever shapeshifted into one of those rocks.
Try to bond with them. Poor dear.
So, but one of the very, very common misconceptions of that scene was that some people even remember the conversation wrong and think that she was expressing that Greg stopped paying attention to her when Rose came. And I'm like, that's the opposite of what she said, but it gets turned around in people's heads.
And I can see how, if you are of that kind of mindset, that her subsequent shape-shifting into Rose wouldn't be read as the moment of despair/desperation that we see it as, but rather as maybe you'll be with me if I'm Rose. Especially as we know some viewers are going to put be with me in that euphemistic capital letter sense.
Yeah.
So
I think that combined with some of the other sort of cues where she makes an off-color comment to him and then she's hanging out with him and then there's this implication that they used to hang out and nobody knows what they were really doing except watching this show, and they mysteriously stopped under mysterious circumstances, that it was expressed to be after Rose was gone. So it's like so many people interpret that as they had a fling And even one of the writers got on Twitter and responded to somebody saying, like, did Amethyst and Greg have a thing? Did Amethyst like Greg? And he's like, they were friends. Amethyst liked Rose. All of the gems liked Rose. And she just, they were friends and she took it too far. But
yeah, I mean, the off-color comment didn't lend to my interpretation at all because that's just what Amethyst does.
That is Amethyst. Yes, absolutely. But,
even now, I don't link that to what happened later. I just think that's her being her.
It is, but I could see why if you're looking for evidence.
Oh yeah.
That if it's showing it in this episode, and then she's making an off-color comment, it's not just any off-color comment. It's her saying that she's seen his junk in an episode where some people are interpreting that as that they had a thing.
Oh yeah. If you're determined to ship them, you're determined to ship them, this is the episode for you.
Mm-hmm. But, she doesn't get, I feel like they would be more explicit if they were going to try to get you to think those kinds of things. There would at least be maybe some touching, like that maybe she would be like. But
I do know enough.
They don't really touch.
Yeah, I do know that if you're a shipper of a not explicit ship, though, you will find anything.
Yes.
And if you're of that, this was a gold mine. And it's also, I could also see how this episode could have been done differently. And what you said about the writer going on Twitter makes me realize it very deliberately wasn't done differently, that it could have been arranged so Stephen just thought they were watching TV, but we clever viewers knew they were up to more. But we could say they really were just watching TV. It's just that they literally weren't doing anything else and shutting out the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. That brings up a good point I wanted to talk about with how rarely we get to see adults talking like adults without Stephen's perspective, without them knowing he's there. And this is another one that's like The Test, like the episode The Test, where Stephen overhears adults talking. And they spoke very adulty, I mean, kids could still understand it, but they weren't simplifying what they were saying. They were speaking about very mature, very fraught concepts. And, then they see that Stephen is listening and they're like, oh no, my goodness.
Well, this is one of the few times that we actually saw an amount of stuff happen without Stephen there at all. Like Stephen walked into the scene of the shape-shifting and the discomfort and all that. It wasn't usually we'd sort of follow him into that already in progress. But this time we saw more than him, even if it was only by a few seconds, which is actually fairly rare so far.
Yeah, they do sometimes do that. I think for a lot of it, he was like sort of hiding behind the couch, overhearing a bunch of it. But it was definitely stuff was in progress before he came into the storage shed. Mm-hmm. And then he realized something was going on that he didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, and I know that most things we see from Stephen's point of view, and I know it's not one of those hard and fast rules. In fact, it sounds like a hard and fast rule people think is there, but it's not. But it is certainly not common to see much happen without an explicit acknowledgement of Stephen's presence.
Yeah, they usually have to find some way that he's involved in observing whatever it is. So, yeah, I think they've said a couple times in commentary that they give it a little wiggle room, that they can have a few moments before or after he has departed. So.
Yeah, and I think given it was never an explicit rule, it's fine to mess with it now and again. It's just
right, sure.
It's the way we usually expect the show to go, but it's not like it's not like it breaks the whole tone of the show if Stephen misses a few seconds or even minutes here and there over the run of a couple hundred episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. Let's talk about some of the funny stuff.
Oh, yes, because there was a lot of funny stuff before we all had our hearts broken.
Yeah. I like the joke about the 3 boxes, or one of them was to put in stuff to burn. And Amethyst says, what are you afraid of? When he says he doesn't want to burn stuff. And he's like, fire?
Fire?
I like that one.
I love how cheesy his sci-fi soft porn looked. Like,
oh my goodness, I loved that too. And it seemed to be the sci-fi soft porn, The Passion of Zanzor, I think it was called. And
it was something just so on the nose and pulpy without actually being explicit.
Right, but it had like a fainting damsel kind of situation, except it was like a man, and he's in the arms of a 4-armed space alien. And I'm like, well.
And the man looks like your typical chiseled space hero, other than being fainted into the arms.
Yeah, I love that so much. It's like, Greg, do you have a type? I think you might have a type. These space alien women.
Tall space alien women. So could he and Rose have just been inevitable by that mark?
Bonus if they have extra arms.
Which Rose
And a ray gun.
could. Rose can do
Yeah.
that. She can shapeshift. A couple extra arms, no problem.
Sure. Or we could get Opal involved. She's a
Oh,
giant
yeah.
woman.
Yeah, I don't think they're a thing, but I can imagine his first sight of Opal is a bit sort of, ooh, okay, calm down.
Yeah.
I'm not into you,
I
but
don't
I'm not
know.
blind.
Yeah. It might be too much of a turn off if it includes Pearl, though.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, he and Pearl's relationship it's weird, but if we compare to today's episode, it's not actually unhealthy per se.
Yeah, the main thing I was thinking of just now was when she fixed his van in House Guest and he came over to hug her and she just like backs away shivering. Like, you know what? I'll tolerate you, but no hugging, no touch. Do not touch me. I will hide behind Garnet.
Garnet, who did her minimalist best this week. She was the Garnet we all know and love.
Great. I love it that, like you were saying, it's just, she doesn't have to say much, but every line is gold, you know?
Well, even though it's hard to convey on audio, just the way she had the clean, exact stack of boxes just balanced on one hand with no trouble.
Yeah, she's the muscle and banging the pans together. And I think I've mentioned this before, is that I have a thing for it. When the gems put on human clothes, I think it's really funny. And they were wearing those sweaters and jackets today, and Garnet said, "Cool dad" on it.
Oh, yeah, I meant to mention that because I thought,
I almost died.
She deserves that jacket. She's the cool dad.
She is. So now she's worn Greg's pants and Greg's jacket.
Yeah, well, I think it balances out because she's big vertically and he's big horizontally, so it kind of averages out when she puts his clothes on.
Mm-hmm. She does have some shoulders. It's got those big shoulder pad things. Could wear big guy jackets. But yeah, that fit her very well. And then Pearl's there in this little sweater.
Suited
And she
them both
said,
in
like
weird
this?
ways.
Like she didn't know how to put it on. Cute.
Like, okay, you're trying too hard, Pearl. You know how to put a sweater on.
Yeah, come on.
It fits my occasional private theory that the gems kind of play to their own personalities.
Yeah. There was another thing that I thought was very subtle where Amethyst is going through Greg's junk and she mocks him when she pulls out that singing fish and says, like, "You bought this?" It's like, Amethyst, you have one too. You literally own one.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's what she meant. You paid money for this, you can get them anywhere.
It could be.
She's
Just
probably
like,
going to take it back to her room and try to mate them.
Yeah, there you go.
See
if they sing the same stuff.
See if you can breed little horrible singing fish.
So I like your commentary about the type of show Lil Butler must have been. I thought the same thing because I lived through all of those decades too. And I'm like, goodness, this is an absolutely ludicrous idea to have a baby that looks like a little old man butler. Just he's now your house slave. And nobody thinks this is problematic because it's the 80s, you know?
And you also realize how many sitcoms back then were about rich people.
Yeah.
I think there was a time growing up where I didn't understand why we didn't have a butler because everyone on TV did.
It really does seem like that, doesn't it? I'm just thinking about how things were. And even if they didn't have a butler, like a lot of times they still had a maid or they had somebody who did their laundry or...
Oh, yeah, the British equivalent was everyone had a housekeeper.
Right. Like, I definitely never had that.
But, I mean, well, look at her example from so many, which is Alice off the Brady Bunch.
Right. Well, at least she was not a mustachioed tiny baby. That was really weird. Yeah. But, you know, they just make up a terrible premise and then they just roll with it forever.
Yeah, I was also vaguely reminded of, I think it was Baby Bob. It's an American show. It bombed here. Apparently it actually ran for some time in the US, which surprised me. But the premise was that the baby could talk like a grown-up. And like, obviously that was enough to get a pitch and several episodes done. Someone said, what if a baby could talk? And they went, okay, here's a commission.
Yeah. Didn't we already do this with Mr. Ed, the talking horse?
Oh, as a kid, I was very much Mr. Ed versus Francis, the talking mule.
I did not understand that show. So time is moving here. We noticed that. But we have New Year's now.
Yeah, we had not quite Christmas before.
Now we had a little snow in with winter forecast. And before that, we had some kind of fall spooky show. So now we are at the beginning of the year. So this is apparently something they do celebrate, and they celebrate with fireworks like we do here. So that is a straight up holiday, I guess, in the world of Steven Universe. Other than that, we just know they celebrate birthdays.
Yeah, oh, too many thereof.
And other than that, we don't know of any holidays.
No, they didn't. They didn't even go to Thanksgiving, and a lot of American shows see that as sacrosanct. So
yeah, they did not have a Thanksgiving episode, did they? And we've got Peedee over there saying he's gonna celebrate the new year by cleaning the condiment bottles with his dad. Try not to party too hard, Peedee. He's supposed to clean them twice, but he wants to clean them 3 times because that feels cleaner. So. Yeah, I mean, it's fun as kind of a joke, but that's OCD right there.
Yeah, at first I thought, oh, he's going to slack off and do it once. Oh no, 3 times. And then he says that thing's
Peedee, yeah.
It's like, okay, it's fairly mild now, Peedee, but just keep an eye on that part of yourself.
Yeah. Mostly at this point, he just seems to be irritated at his brother for not working enough.
Yeah, well, as established, people getting irritated of his brother is not a rare thing, and not necessarily unfounded.
Yeah. I guess other than that, he just seems to be more irritated some days than others that Steven is not ordering off of the actual menu, that he wants the bits.
Well, also like the cut to the chase of Steven asks for the breakfast-only breakfast special. He just says, I'll get some hash browns.
Right.
So there's nothing that fancy about it.
Then you never see Ronaldo. He yells at Ronaldo to bring him the hash browns, and then he's talking to Steven about fireworks, and then he just pulls up a bag and gives it to him. You never see the stuff get delivered.
No, I mean, it was lucky Ronaldo wasn't freaking out over that year having a leap second or something.
Yeah, maybe he thought that the blue fireworks were a secret conspiracy from aliens, not the ones that were living next door.
Well, I also sometimes think that now and again, the people of Beach City expect Ronaldo to freak out about and find a weird explanation for something, and he just says, oh, no, that happens, and he just says a completely normal thing and moves on. Yeah. And like, oh, Aurora Borealis, yeah, that's the light refracting off the atmosphere. Yeah, okay.
An actual scientific phenomenon that he knows about. What do you think about Amethyst taking all that stuff and putting it in her room?
It does get it out of the way. I imagine it's going to quickly become part of her junk sculptures and maze and what have you. I think in spirit it's supposed to be that if Greg needs any of this stuff, he can come back and get it. But if Greg's like many people, not even hoarders, just people who have trouble getting rid of stuff, he won't actually ever need it again, despite what he thinks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, if he was trying to maybe close out the lease on that thing or something, like maybe he just didn't want to have to pay for the storage unit anymore.
And all of us who've tried to do some kind of clean out or chalk out or whatever have had this thing. So, oh no, I can't get rid of this. I always read this or use this or whatever this. And we do no such thing. We just can't actually bring ourselves to cut off that avenue.
Yeah.
So I can imagine Greg has a bit of that. Even if he's not a hoarder per se, he still has trouble getting rid of stuff.
Yeah. And, if you only just live in a van, you don't have anywhere to put stuff.
Yeah, so him having a storage locker in itself is pretty reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, if he's not going to close out the lease, now he has all that space to fill it up again.
Well, yeah.
Did you hear when he was asking, did you find the deed to my uncle's mansion? I was thinking, really? You were a rich relative?
Yeah, this also fits with Greg's family being sort of weird, eccentric and pretty well off, but Greg being Greg just isn't necessarily in touch with it all. We met the ones that we didn't meet them, but we heard mention of the ones who had the barn and all the cool stuff in it.
Yeah, and he made that comment about, I'm starting to think our family has a problem. Didn't they have like lunches? They had boxes that were labeled food.
Yeah. Oh, Amethyst will be fine with them.
Oh, yeah. Most likely.
In fact, now I think about it, maybe Greg is like almost the last one standing of his side of the family. And so he's kind of got access to these mansions and barns and whatever else. He just doesn't quite have what he needs or knows to actually go and, live in them or spend time in them or whatever.
Yeah. Who knows where this mansion is?
Or it could be, if I could just find that deed, I could go move into the mansion. But until then, I am in my van and my storage locker.
Right. It's like, okay, there's some stuff in here I've been meaning to inventory. Okay, light cannon, mansion deed.
I think he has a lot of habits which are just this side of being actual issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think, for example, that he has like full-blown ADD or ADHD, but I do think there's a lot of stuff he just doesn't get around to doing.
Yeah.
And as someone who does have ADD, I feel the border between those things.
Mm-hmm.
Just as I don't think he's a hoarder, but I think it's hard for him to get rid of stuff sometimes.
Right.
He has inconveniences more than disorders.
Mm-hmm. Maybe just the tendencies that people who have more extreme versions of them have in an unhealthy amount, or an amount that needs to be managed with some other help, that he's, like you said, this side of functional with it.
Yeah. So he can make a case for this might come in handy one day, but chances are it never will.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one day he might get a cat.
Yeah. Or you could just have Amethyst shapeshift into one and get in the cat carrier. She's done that.
Yeah, she'd probably enjoy that.
Impression. Oh, see, and again, we have cat mentions in here.
Yep. Again, it's a cat show, this one.
It really is.
That's why Dog Copter seems like such a novelty, not because he's a copter, but because he's a dog.
Yeah, amongst all of these cats, including Cookie Cat. It's funny that Stephen is the only one enforcing his own grounding from the television.
Well, yeah, this is what I can imagine some children of that age doing. Rather than trying to escape their punishment, they take it very much to heart that they remember it long before the adults who applied it have forgotten. Particularly as he seems to think he is literally grounded for 1,000 years, in the sense of from this point until the Earth has been around the sun 1,000 times. It's not just a metaphor.
Yeah.
So he's still got 999 years minus a few months to go.
My goodness, he's going to have so many seasons to binge stuff. Yeah. Do you currently have or have ever had a binge buddy like that?
Yeah, when my flatmate was still here. And in fact, yeah, I still have a binge buddy like that when we're not all hiding from COVID-19. I have a couple of friends I go to their house each weekend and do such things.
Yeah. I don't think I can count what we're doing because we're not binging. We're kind of doing the opposite.
No, in some ways, this is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I found how much I love this show. The curse because now I have to watch it in savoured drips.
Yeah.
But it does mean that I don't sort of just dismiss any episodes as sort of, the 11-minute gap between this one and the next one, because I'm definitely watching each episode.
Yeah. I feel like the way that I watched it was a little more like I ate a really big meal and there are a lot of courses I didn't taste the first time through. But I don't know, there's something really enjoyable about that too, just churning your way through a show that you're all caught up in. But I don't know, I do kind of wish that I'd taken my time a little more. But you know what, the way that things are with so many shows kind of coming out directly with like a whole season released at once, I'm not so much a fan of that. I know a lot of people do like that a lot because then they can just watch as much of it as they want and not have to have a lot of these. Sometimes it eliminates certain kinds of cliffhangers. But I don't know. It's especially with something like, say, when Steven Universe would occasionally do some kind of marathon or they release like a bunch of episodes at once or very close together. You don't really get a chance to sit there and savor them the way that you do when we were getting just baby spoon fed with like one episode, and then like, okay, we're on hiatus again. So we're going to talk about this episode for a really long time.
I think for me it depends on the show whether I like the whole season dropping at once thing. Like to pick one of our favorite mentions, Doctor Who still goes the week by week thing, and even though of course like any fan I'm sometimes impatient in those weeks between, I like those gaps between the cliffhangers and between each story and, sort of, what's this about for the 10 weeks between the start and the end of the season. Whereas a show like, just to pick one at random that I've been watching Space Force on Netflix. I don't mind that I watched a whole bunch of that at once. And if they get a second season, I don't think I'm going to hate the ability to watch that in a bundle too.
Yeah.
So I think some shows are better for it than others.
I think so too. And when we get to them, there are some episodes in this show that I'll talk about when we get to that point, but that I really feel like the airing schedule did them a disservice and that they were frustrating instead of enjoyable because of how long it took to get to the next place that people were so impatient about. And, something that I thought was a really, honestly, pretty brilliant subject to cover in a show like this was just, it was hated on a lot because people wanted action. They wanted to get back to the action. So it's, this episode that we watched today was not plotty,
And I can imagine if you were a fan just who had been waiting for weeks or months for, please God, a fresh new episode of Steven Universe, and then you got Garnet's Universe or something, you might go, I've kind of wanted more than this after all this time.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily that it's a bad episode per se, but if you've been deprived for that long, you don't want the sort of incidental, experimental episode.
That's right. Something that you might have a sense of humor about if you had more to choose from.
And that is one thing about the way we're doing this, is that by doing one episode, then one episode, regardless of whether it's a multi-part or a big significant episode or one that was just made to fill the order, it's still one we watch and consider and discuss. And in that way, they all become as worthy as each other.
Right. Even though some, we have a lot more to say.
Well, yes, there's that. But if, say, we were doing like 3 at a time or something, there would be occasions where we could easily have buried one of them in favor of the other two.
I worry about that happening if people are watching them just back to back. It seems like it's certain things get so overlooked. Oh, especially if there's an episode that's really good and then it's followed by one of those really just big episodes. Thinking of like the 2 or 3 in this show that just blew everyone's minds, which we haven't gotten to any of them yet, but they're, the episodes that are on either side of them just might as well have disappeared.
And of course, going one by one unprepared also means I have no idea whether I'm about to watch a fairly straightforward and possibly forgettable one or one of the big wham episodes. So I've got to pay attention, and I could be hit very hard by what's in the episode.
That's right. Yeah. So,
Follow-up questions!
Speaking of being hit hard, should I try to formulate a probing question for you?
That is a coin of phrase.
No, not the mind probe.
Yeah. This was a heavy episode. While we were talking about the issues, I was just trying to think of what could I ask you, the kind of your opinion about the center of this episode that's very heavy. And of course, it was all about, Amethyst's reaction and coping mechanisms and stuff, what they did after Rose had passed. Do you have any thoughts on the types of coping mechanisms that Garnet or Pearl might have used after Rose was gone?
Good question. As I said, I do think they are possibly better at adapting just because of their natural personality types. I'm not saying they wouldn't freak out or they wouldn't grieve or anything like that, but there's a spectrum. I can imagine Garnet taking it stoically, then doing something like saying, excuse me, walking out into the garden, then screaming onto the heavens and just coming back in and saying, thank you, I'm back. I think there are certain emotions she likes to, when she lets them out, she likes to let them out on her own terms.
I could see that.
And possibly she may stumble onto some brief words of wisdom and reassurance. I could see her doing that more for someone like Steven than Pearl, but I can still see that in her wheelhouse. Pearl could nonetheless be a blubbering mess for a while. That seems like a thing Pearl could entirely do, but I also think that would be her processing and letting it out. I mean, as gems are ageless and almost indestructible, their deaths are probably not common occurrences, but they did have a big war, so mind you, I suppose by the time we got to Rose's passing, they wouldn't have seen much of that in quite a while after having been on Earth all that time.
They probably didn't expect her to perish outside of wartime.
Yeah, and we've said ourselves we're not quite sure how much anyone outside of Rose herself knew about what birthing Stephen would or wouldn't do to her.
Yeah.
But I can see Pearl becoming a blubbering mess, but almost humanly learning to cope that bit more each day. And sometimes her dependence on cleaning is something that's not healthy for her, but sometimes I think it is a good outlet and something she can handle and control, and in that way is actually therapeutic. So it's all a matter of how she does her cleaning wonk as to whether it's good or bad for her. I mean, as we said, it was 10-something years that Rose had been gone by the time we joined them. So there was plenty of time for them to get to some form of stability again.
Yeah.
So, we didn't join them in the aftermath of Rose's funeral or something, if even such a thing happened, but it wasn't an immediate event. This was something it was a sad part of their past, but it was a part they were comfortable acknowledging, if you will.
Yeah.
Because when Greg, who is definitely human and largely understands these things on a human level, he was talking about Rose in fond terms of sad that she was gone, but glad that she'd been here, and without crushing himself every time he mentioned her, as well, does happen in real life, but to some people, but didn't happen to him. So I found that was actually a fairly realistic long-term showing of the characters doing that, even if they're not all entirely human.
Yeah. They do come across as pretty human sometimes, though.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of, and not just these ones, I think a lot of non-human characters, they will very much push we don't understand this, we're not human line, but will actually be far closer than they let on.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
I mean, let's face it, Pearl is this close to being someone we've all met in some form or another, especially.
Yeah. She is special. I had a one-time thing where they invited me over to talk about this show for a while. I can't even remember. I think it was sometime in the middle of season 2 or something. It was a long time ago, and we just talked about stuff. And he said, I think Pearl is the most interesting animated character I've ever seen. And I was like, wow. I mean, now that you mention it. But she's so relatable in so many ways. Like, she's not the character I relate to the most, but a lot of people see aspects of themselves in how she acts, because as much as she talks about being an alien and not understanding humans, she, like you said, she is so much like us.
And I think she's also relatable to many of us, because even if we're not like Pearl, we know someone like her. We know that person who likes to keep things clean, sometimes to an impractical level. We know that person who likes to fuss about things just that bit more than we'd like.
Yep.
So I think that's another kind of relatable, not just necessarily I'm like that, but I know that. I've seen that before. I can contextualize around that. That is my friend Mabel. That is my Uncle Dennis, whatever.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. Yeah. And it's not even that exaggerated most of the time. Like, every once in a while they sort of make a joke out of it. Like, she's stabbing this stack of junk with her spear because it's not symmetrical. But, we get it.
And this week trod the line with her excellent Pearl powers would be great at sorting out this junk, but that's also kind of true to life too.
Oh, sure.
I mean, one of my friends who is kind of like that is I'm actually soon to ask for her help sorting out some of my stuff. So
really?
It's definitely a thing that happens.
Has she seen your junk before?
Yeah, I keep asking if she just wants to come around and look at my junk, and she just keeps hanging up.
Oh my goodness. Wow. All right.
There was only just food this week. There was hash browns. There was breakfast-only breakfast special hash browns.
You know what's super peculiar about that is you never see it. You don't ever see what they're eating.
We just know it's in a paper bag. We assume the Fryman family can accurately put hash browns in a paper bag, but we don't really see it. I mean, even...
Yeah. I'm trying to reproduce this food and I can't see it. So yeah, the food thing was very up to interpretation, I guess, because is breakfast only breakfast special? I was like, well, is it just hash browns or is it something else and hash browns? I knew it had to be potato related. And then they ate it with their hands. But you just see them taking fistfuls of something and then you just see the fist and it goes right in their mouth. I'm like analyzing this. It's like, is there any scrap of anything that I can figure out? What the heck is this? I just decided they're eating hash browns with their hands.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And frustratingly, the main character we see doing it is Amethyst, who A, doesn't know it's supposed to be hash browns, and B, wouldn't really pass comment as long as she got to eat it anyway.
Yep. So yeah, I just made hash browns and I wanted to try to make them so that they would be handleable like that you could pick them up and eat them and be gross that way. So I did, but yeah, I just put he said double order of hash browns. So I did 2 potatoes.
Like I say, so presumably that means at least 2 hash browns or some other even number.
Yeah. So, other than that, it was just seasoned with salt, pepper, and onion powder, I think. I think that's what I did. You boil the potatoes and then you can shred them. Some people peel them, but I don't care about that. I just like them to be potatoes. I like potato skins. So, but when you want to make hash browns, you have to press the water out because it'll splatter and stuff. So, and then I put them on a skillet actually, and 10 minutes on both sides. And threw them in because, if you're going to do something like this, it has to be all about presentation. So I made a little bag with a Beach City Fries sticker on it and put it in there, tried to get the grease stains to look nice, and threw the specials in there. And I did eat it with my hands and it was delicious. But how can you screw up potatoes? You probably could, but yeah. I didn't.
It's doable. You can screw them up.
Yeah, I guess I've had overly greasy or not all the way cooked potatoes, but I don't know. So that was it. My breakfast-only breakfast special.
No song this week, which is unusual for such an emotion-heavy episode, but really I thought the emotion was better just raw, to be honest.
I agree. We did have the theme song from Little Butler, so I still count that as a song, but it was not sung by the characters.
Yep, but it's definitely in there, of course.
Had this ridiculous theme song about how the little butler came to them. But other than that, I think there really wasn't even much environmental music. It was very raw, kind of,
Yeah. And I think if they tried to do a song about that painful emotion in the middle, it would have reduced the effect or watered it down. I think
you might be right.
I think that level of discomfort you need just smacking at you raw. Anything else would be like telling you how to feel, which sometimes kind of works with additional music, but it's for me at least, other viewers of course may feel differently. I didn't want this couched in any other terms. I wanted my own set of emotions just to smack against each other and not have a sort of character to character sing off persuading me everything was going to be all right or making it complex. I liked it just kind of punched you in the face with that.
I agree. I feel like it's easier to digest emotion if it's sung to you, and this wanted to make you uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yes, that's the way to put it.
And it worked. You're just standing there going, oh God, please don't are you going where I think you're going? Please don't go there. I don't know if you were, because you're watching this thing, but during the whole scene, I'm just sitting there with my hands over my face, oh God, they're doing it. And I know what's coming, but it's just the cringe is real.
Yeah, I could see out the corner of my eye, and the bit of free brain I had left was wondering, is she hiding or crying?
I did not cry in this one, but I just cringed really hard. I'm like, I don't even want to.
I was left too cold to cry.
Yeah, just so it's just so hard to watch because their Amethyst is really, she's behaving in such a uncomfortable way to Greg, and I don't know. You care about both of them, but definitely, like you were saying, it's hard to relate to where Amethyst is coming from on this.
And credit to both voice actors and writers in that, because it would have been very easy for either of them to topple it too far into cartooniness and, again, water it down or not make it as harsh, or push it too far the other way and make it just not feel like the characters anymore.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Which would have derailed it, because part of the thing is that we feel this is these characters, these people we know doing this to each other. If they suddenly derailed and broke character, it would still be uncomfortable because we were seeing it and they still look the same, but it would take you out of it. You wouldn't feel it as hard.
I think so. Yeah. And a lot of that did depend on knowing them.
Because it would have been
heavy without it.
It would have been very easy for Greg's protest to be delivered in an entirely serious voice, and of course it was serious, but if it had made it too serious, it wouldn't sound like Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Greg still sounds like a cartoon character because he is.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be for something like this.
I agree. I wasn't thinking about the voice acting very much in this, but you're right. It was on point. It was great. It was appropriate for exactly what it was, especially during that specific scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as my heart's concerned, this episode was that 1 minute and some other stuff happened either side.
Yeah.
If only I had known that.
Well, it probably doesn't surprise you to hear that along with the usual storyboard team of Hilary Flordo and Katie Nitroff, they did have Rebecca on this one. And a lot of those complicated faces were clearly hers. She puts more lines on faces when there's more emotion, and you could just see the face that she drew on Steven when he's reacting, and she draws these kind of oblong eyeballs on people sometimes, and I was like, wow, that is like straight out of the comics that she draws.
Yeah, I started to notice there's one of them, or maybe a couple of them, but one of them at least tends to draw the faces, I guess I think of it as slightly taller, and I think that must be Rebecca's style I'm noticing.
Yeah, you're right.
That was where I noticed it most.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. You're right. I think she puts people's mouths farther down in their face or something. It's hard to put your finger on, I guess, but it really gives them a very different sort of look, like less cutesy and more just, this is the cartoon character that's seen some shit.
Yeah.
She's talked about that before, how like sometimes it's refreshing to kind of draw these funny cartoon characters, like feeling emotions that you don't think that somebody who looks like that would feel, but you can draw that on their faces. And they have very simple features, so it's easy to get that effect if you know what you're doing. My goodness. Yeah, it really jumps out at me sometimes after having read some of her earlier comics and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is that face. This is that kind of face, the way that the eyeballs are shiny. And it's very Rebecca. So I don't know if they were like, okay, you draw this scene, or if it was like, it was drawn and then she's like, no, I want to ramp up the uncomfortableness. Let me draw more lines on their faces.
I wonder if also sometimes maybe just influence seeps through if they're working on it together and they start going, this is such Rebecca scene, I find myself drawing in a Rebecca way.
I know I don't know specifically on this one, but there are some episodes that she redrew some of the stuff after the voice actors got involved. And she's like, oh, I want their faces to match how they spoke better than what was already drawn. And she's done that a few times. So do you want to know how they described this one in the episode descriptions?
Oh, please do.
So they called this a cleanup job, reunites Greg and Amethyst with their favorite cheesy sitcom, Lil Butler.
Oh, that sounds wholesome. That sounds painless.
Just like on the run.
This should be a funny, lighthearted episode about some old TV jokes.
I'm sure there won't be any heartbreaking drama at all. So there's a couple more factoids that I could share.
Oh, yes.
That one was just something I noticed when Amethyst was trying to tempt Greg with the 2-part Hawaiian special. I'm like, oh, they have Hawaii in this world.
That's 2 states we know they have.
Right. And some of the book covers, I think specifically the book cover that I recognized looked like Lord of the Flies. So he's like, yeah, you can read that. Just don't read my porn. It's probably much more disturbing than any porn. But I have a couple notes about the couple little extra voice actors. The guy who did Little Butler himself was done by someone named Eric Bell Jr., who I don't know anything about, the actor. So factoid, I guess. And I know the rich dad in the Money Family was somebody who does a lot of the sort of background stuff on previous episodes. It's Chris Jai Alex, who did Lonely Blade and Dogcopter when he talked in Lion 3, if I'm not mistaken. And there was another one. Oh, the video game character, the golf kid.
Sounds like he's the go-to from when some kind of show inside the show has to talk.
Yeah, it seems like he got a lot of those little like weird character voices, and they're pretty different from each other too. So yeah, I think that's what he did. But I didn't look up who. I know I heard a lady's voice being like the daughter of the family who was like, I'd look like a fool if I showed up on just one pony or something like that. And I'm pretty sure that is Dee Dee who does Pearl. I think she was doing that voice. Other than that, I don't think I have any other factoids. I think that was it. But I do have one more thing.
Brand spanking new, mint in box.
I've decided to show you today another toy from the Titans line, which I have showed you a Titans before. This time I have a shape-shifted Amethyst.
Ah! You have Amethyst shape-shifted into Steven.
Yes.
With an alarming expression.
And because she did that very sort of awkwardly and painfully in this episode, I figured this would be a good episode for it. But, you know, they have a few of these of different things. He's got a weird bulb on his head. Because, you know, if you make Steven, then you can just make a purple one and it's Amethyst.
Yes.
So that is what I've decided to show you in terms of merchandise because, you know, I don't have any purple rose quartzes or purple Gregs. Thank God.
No Lil Butler box sets.
No, I don't think that there is any Little Butler merchandise. There might be like a sticker or something, but right now I don't think there is anything like that.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone's done themselves like a custom job of a Lil Butler DVD box or something.
You know, wouldn't be surprised. Oh my goodness. So there was a reference to Lil Butler there's a postcards book. Maybe I'll bring that on one of these times, but there's a postcards book and one of them is a Lil Butler postcard. And on the back, it has some factoids about the show. And I don't remember what the number was, but they said how many episodes it ran. I don't know if it's canon, but
it would have been so much fun making up fake TV facts for Lil Butler.
Yes. I'm wondering now if it's how many episodes Steven Universe ended up being. The postcard book was released a really long time ago. So, and you can actually pull them out and send them and stuff. So I never have because I want to keep them, but I saw somebody individually selling the postcards on eBay.
Oh, no.
Unused, single postcard. I'm like, all right, I mean, if you only want that one, pay $2.99 for it. The whole book together is like $7, so.
You see that in Transformers sometimes. Some people buy one of the bigger figures or sets just so they can sell the individual components, which once you start doing the sums, you realize, they're selling the bits for far more than fractions of the proportionate fractions of the whole set.
That's how they get you.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on this episode? I'm out of juice on it, except for my Titan Steven is grinning at you kind of disturbingly.
Yeah.
He's got weird little ears.
I suppose because it's really Amethyst. Her eyelash looks a bit like she's wearing glasses from certain angles.
Yeah, I have noticed these eyelashes on her Steven Tag Steven.
Well, it's like
weird little eyelashes.
Just like Garnet Steven Tag had the sunglasses.
Yeah, it was odd that her Steven had eyelashes because she typically does not have eyelashes in her natural form. So I don't know why they do that. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's the cutest root of thought that I'll leave eyelashes on, otherwise people won't know I am Amethyst. Just overlooks the fact that she's completely purple.
Right. Oh my goodness. You don't see her gem though. It must be under the fake shirt. So.
Yeah, well, as we know, I went through a long period of thinking gems had to be perpetually uncovered, and then as soon as I was ready to voice the theory in that very episode, Garnet put gloves on, so...
Yeah. And Steven's walking around with his shirt over his most of the time.
Yep, true.
But he's Steven. He's different.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll maybe wrap this one. This is going to be a long one.
Yeah.
So...
But yeah, I let out my many feelings about this episode.
As have I cooked them up nicely for you, like some breakfast specials. And we'll see all you folks in the next one, which is called Marble Madness. Thanks for listening.
Bye, y'all.
All right. You've been listening to Ivy and Daria on Not So Giant Women.
You can find episodes of the show in video form by looking up Not So Giant Women on YouTube.
Or in audio form at anchor.fm/notsogiantwomen or your podcatcher of choice. You can also find us on Facebook.
Audio production by Daria.
Video production and music by Ivy.
Daria can also be heard on Podsploitation, the Ozploitation podcast.
And Ivy at her Steven Universe fan blog at love-takes-work.tumblr.com.
Steven Universe was created by Rebecca Sugar and remains property of Cartoon Network.
No infringement is intended.